Hi, my name is FIFA Raman, and I've been working at the intersection of health and law internationally for the past 7 to 8 years, driven primarily by humanitarian and scientific values. And today I'd like to comment on the recent occurrences in Malaysia in terms of whether or not Malaysia is a moderate country or not. And I'm doing this because primarily I am a concerned Malaysian citizen. And there are important questions to be asked about this situation because ideological supremacy will in turn into violent extremism, and it's important that we sort out the root causes instead of just working on the violent jihadism that is permeating our societies. So here we go. I'd like to talk first about the fact that whenever concerning things happen like this, the immediate response by non-Malaysians is, what I thought Malaysia was a moderate country. Malaysia's quite moderate, isn't it? Why is this happening? So let's talk about some occurrences that have happened in the past 2 or 3 years and see, you can make up your own conclusion on whether Malaysia is moderate or not. So let's start a little further back in terms of what world leaders have said about Malaysia. So in 2012, David Cameron said in a speech that he made with the Prime Minister Najib, he said that Malaysia is, going to be a great partner in the global movement of moderates. This was followed by Barack Obama, who said that Malaysia was a moderate Muslim country and was a valuable partner in the fight against terrorism, and he said this in 2015. And this year, in April, Prime Minister Najib went to India to meet Narendra Modi to talk about regional efforts to combat extremism. Now, as I've said before, I wonder how much these are focused on ideological extremism as opposed to just violent jihadist terrorism. So I think that's a question that we need to ask. Now, next we can start to talk about situations in Malaysia which show ideological extremism. For example, I'm going to start with the way that spaces, professional and public spaces for women and girls in Malaysia are being shut down. So they're slowly being restricted. And I have 3 examples for this. And the first is starting with the girl who was prevented from continuing in a chess competition in Kuala Lumpur because she was wearing a sundress, a knee-length sundress, and she was a little girl, and they said she was being seductive. And she could no longer compete in this competition. So there's examples like that. This child could be a major genius. She could be, major contributor to the country's honor and the country's pride and the country's economy even in the future. But this professional space has been closed for her. I also want to talk about the incident where a non-Muslim woman was going to the Malaysian version of the DMV, basically, to either renew a driving license or to have something to do with road transport, just running errands. And her knee-length skirt was deemed to be inappropriate, and she was asked to cover up with a sarong. So, these incidents are getting even more widespread. And I myself have been a victim of this harmful modesty culture. And I was supposed to give a talk on hepatitis C at a women's prison in Kuala Lumpur. And I was wearing jeans and a loose t-shirt. And the reason I was wearing jeans was because we would probably have to sit on the floor with prisoners. I don't like it for prisoners to be on the floor and then, the rest of us trainers to be above it. We should be at the same level. So I wore jeans, and they said, so the female wardens, when we got there, she said that the shape of my body could be seen. So she could notice the shape of my body, and therefore I could not go into the women's prison. So she asked me to cover up with a blazer, but as a matter of principle, I didn't think that that was the right thing to do, and I left. So these are quite serious issues, in that, in addition to the harmful modesty culture that is happening and the closing of professional spaces, there seems to be an inability to assess what is more important in this situation. Was it more important that that girl got to carry out her chess competition and participate in the chess competition? Or was it more important to pander to the modesty culture? Was it more important that my body shape be covered up, even though it was a loose t-shirt, to the expense of female prisoners who need help on hepatitis C? So there's that. In addition to this, sorry for the break in the video, there's a cat that jumped in the window. So I was talking about incidents in Malaysia that highlight increasing ideological extremism. And there's also the incidents where Muslims are differentiated or segregated from non-Muslims. And this is something that happened recently in a primary school, where classes were segregated and labeled. Some classes were for non-Muslims and some classes were for Muslims. And this, sends a horrible racist message. And this has happened also in the past, where people have campaigned that supermarket trolleys be segregated based on non-Muslim and Muslims supermarket trolleys, so that pork and non-halal products could be separated. And, this is just another way to create disunity and supremacy of a certain ethnicity or a certain religious background. In addition to that, there's been this situation with the bin Abdullah case. So the situation in Malaysia is where people, a Muslim couple who has a child out of wedlock, automatically, as per Malaysian law, the child cannot take the surname of the father. So the child will have bin Abdullah at the back of his or her name, or binti Abdullah. So recently the Court of Appeal said that, this was uncalled for, and removed it, basically, and said that it was unlawful and unconstitutional. And, of course, this law is a horrifying law that labels children as bastards, basically. And this is what I mean. I think we've gotten to a certain point where certain people are not sure what is the moral thing to do. And this is especially illustrated with the recent situation, and the recent ruckus with the atheists in Malaysia, who were having a meeting and were subsequently subject to death threats and a declaration that they should be hunted down. And this declaration was made by a minister. So it's actually amazing how many people on social media have come out and said, behead them. And this is, the fact that this is socially acceptable is the problem. It's a problem that people can say, let's go behead atheists. And there's so many people in the comments going, sure, let's do it. Give me the address. Let's go get them. WhatsApp me at this number, and I'm on board. And you keep scrolling and scrolling, and you find that we're not talking about 20 people who are bloodthirsty and want to behead anyone that's different from them. We're talking about many, many, many Muslim Malaysians who are, who think hatred is morally compelling in this situation. So I suppose what I want to talk about and ask is whether we really need a reevaluation of what morality is. Because when did Quran 8:12, which says, which talks about casting terror into the hearts of the disbelievers and striking them upon their necks, become more important than Quran 90:13, which extols the values of freeing slaves? Can we just discuss for a minute how wonderful it would be if far-right Muslims would concentrate all their values on freeing child sex slaves, or working on improving employment rights for trafficked migrant workers? What a wonderful place this world would be if that would happen, instead of people saying, let's behead atheists, let's behead LGBT, let's behead liberal Muslims. And it really depends on what moderate means, doesn't it? Because, Saudi Arabia is considered to be quite radical, and that's kind of, well known, and there's no dispute about that. And they're considered radical because they behead people in the street, they publicly flog people, and they subjugate women. So they're considered radical. So what does it mean if other countries do slightly less than that? Is that when they're called moderate? So this is something that we need to think about. Majid Nawaz talks about it, and he's coined this phrase that I'm sure will live on forever. He said, Muslim countries are subjected to the bigotry of low expectations. So as long as you're not behaving totally radical, it's fine. And you get this label, moderate. But Malaysia's not moderate, is it? It's struggling with this situation which Yuval Noah Harari talks about in his book Homo Deus, and he talks about how in the olden days people would glorify their religions, be so focused on glorifying their religions that they forget about the real feeling sentient human beings in their midst. And for example, Egypt, when all the pyramids were being built, it was for the glory of some being or some doctrine, and the welfare of the people building the pyramids were not taken care of. So, how do we redefine morality to mean the betterment of humankind over and above everything else? How do we do that? And it's an important question that we need to talk about, and not just in terms of violent extremism, but also in terms of ideological supremacy, ideological extremism. And this video is by no means a partisan video. I've got friends on both sides of this political spectrum in Malaysia, but one question that people have asked me is, when did this start? Who started this? Now, the current government did not initiate this degradation into immoral, catastrophe. It wasn't started by this government, but it was started by previous governments. This integration of Wahhabi ideals into the local education system, and it became okay. And there are wonderful, wonderful people in Malaysia who are fighting against this. And this includes many, many liberal Muslims. But I want to end with a quote from Herbert Hoover, who said that when there's a lack of honor in government, the morals of the whole people are poisoned. And this is a video about moderation, about whether we need to have a real discussion about what morality means within and without religion. And I hope that we can discuss it in a civil manner and in a constructive manner. Thank you for watching. A couple of things I've forgotten. If anyone's interested in learning more about what happened to me in terms of the women's prison, there is a podcast online by the wonderful radio station BFM. And in that podcast, me and this wonderful feminist scholar called Alicia Isharuddin, as well as a woman empowerment activist from Malaysia called Suri Kempe, talk about subjugation in Malaysia and Islamist fascism. So it's a really interesting podcast to listen to, and I've linked it down below. And I wanted to also say that if you're interested in chatting, please leave a comment below, or you can engage with me on Twitter at FIFA Raman. So I'll link all this below. Thanks for watching.